Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1262 of the Juicebox Podcast. Well, this is a two-parter. We don't do this very often, but part one is today. I don't usually date my stuff, but today's Thursday. You're getting part one, and tomorrow and Friday you'll get part two. It's with Brianna, the mother of a child who has type 1 diabetes and was diagnosed at 9.5 months old. I'm not going to ruin the whole thing for you right here, but it's a crazy DKA story. It involves a helicopter. Mom goes to the hospital for something else. There's a whole lot going on. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Don't forget, if you use my link, drinkag1.com/juicebox, you'll get a free year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first order. And if you go to cozyearth.com and use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout, you're going to save 30% off of your entire order. Subscribing to the Juicebox Podcast newsletter is this easy. You type juiceboxpodcast.com into a browser, scroll to the bottom, put in your email address, click sign up. If you're looking for community around type 1 diabetes, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. Did you know if just one person in your family has type 1 diabetes, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too? So screen it like you mean it. One blood test can spot type 1 diabetes early. Tap now, talk to a doctor, or visit screenedfortype1.com for more info. Having an easy-to-use and accurate blood glucose meter is just one click away. ContourNext.com/juicebox. That's right, today's episode is sponsored by the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense. The Eversense CGM is more convenient, requiring only one sensor every 6 months. It offers more flexibility with its easy-on, easy-off smart transmitter and allows you to take a break when needed. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox.
Hi, I'm Brianna. I am mom to Kai, who is 2 years old. He just turned 2 in October, and he was diagnosed at 9.5 months old back in July of 2022.
Wow. Okay. So not that long ago.
Yep. Or almost a year and a half exactly.
9.5 months old, year and a half with diabetes. And do you have any type 1 in your family?
We do not have type 1 in our family that, anywhere that we're aware of. I do, of course, have Hashimoto's.
I like how you said, of course. Yeah. You listen to the podcast. Yeah. You're like, obviously, I have a problem with my thyroid.
Yeah, that's always it seems to come up a lot. Yeah. And I found out more about autoimmune after he was born or after he was diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And I have another autoimmune condition that was actually my first autoimmune condition, geographic tongue.
Wait, what? Wait.
So I didn't realize until probably about a month ago that was actually autoimmune. But, I always, when I was younger, I didn't realize, that it wasn't normal. But my tongue was just kind of sensitive, and I could my taste buds, you could they're pronounced, and you can kind of move that, they move.
Get out. Do you know, Brianna, you've done a thing here. You've said something no one else has ever said before. Or my memory's garbage, but I've never heard the words geographic tongue before. Hold on. Geographic tongue results from the loss of tiny hair-like structures on your tongue surface. These structures are called papilla. Is that right? Papilla? Mm-hmm. Whatever. The loss of these appears as smooth red patches on different shapes and sizes. Geographic tongue is an inflammatory but harmless condition affecting the surface of the tongue. Does it seem harmless to you, by the way?
Yeah, I mean, it mostly has been, but lately, I've been running into, kind of my own autoimmune issues, just trying to figure things out. And I saw an oral surgeon, and he was the one who said, it was something that was autoimmune and can flare. I had it since I was 8 or 9 years old. Oh. Just kind of continuing on. I just got done getting blood work done, for an autoimmune panel for myself. So anyways, just learned a lot. I didn't really quite understand, what autoimmune was until my son was diagnosed with type 1, and then they started asking all of these questions.
Right. Do you think you're going to come up with other issues you're having? Do you have other symptoms of things?
I do. Yeah. Spiraling from his diagnosis, we're really sleep deprived and, just really stressed out for, the past year and a half. And back in June, just started kind of having some like dizzy sensation and just like feeling off. And, I had blood work done, pretty much couldn't find anything and just continued to get worse. We're really pushing into things because of the podcast, thankfully. I asked them to continue because I have like every single symptom of hypothyroidism. And she did blood work and my TSH was like a 5.49.
So, yeah.
I was like, can we please treat? And she's like, no, she's like, I don't really feel comfortable. And, it had been 3 months since my labs were drawn. And I'm like, can like, just like prophylactically, like see if it helps, if she's not going to treat at that level, she wanted to get additional labs. So I just got my labs back and they were 6.06 for my TSH. So she finally put me on low dose levothyroxine.
Oh, yeah. The big difference from the 5.9 to the 6.06 really changed things.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to be honest with you. Aren't you baffled that a guy with a podcast is the one who has to tell you something like this? And the doctor's like, I see that you've figured out what's wrong with you, but let's not do anything about it.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. And, even when I went to my family doctor the other day, she's like, oh, that should be between 2 and 3. So it's just crazy. And this was my endocrinologist that wouldn't treat me. Mm-hmm. So it's just crazy, like how vastly
the information
different
is. Yeah.
Yeah. So
how long have you been on it? And did you feel a relief?
It's been probably about 6 days. So can't really tell yet. But, one of the biggest symptoms is just like low mood and, just like foggy and things like that. And so like, obviously, with taking care of my son who's 2 and, it's diabetes and it's like, I want to feel my best. So anyway, so here we are.
Brianna, I want to tell you that if this was a just world, which it is not, but if it was, married men everywhere would get together and build a marble statue of me. Okay. And just for the hours I've saved them of going, I don't know what's happening. Why is she yelling? And by the way, vice versa, like anybody, I don't care. I'm just saying, in my personal experience, I was considering pushing my wife down a cliff when her thyroid was all messed up. I was like, why is she acting like this? But it's crazy what it can do to you. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Eversense CGM. Boasting a 6-month sensor, the Eversense CGM offers you these key advantages: distinct on-body vibe alerts when high or low, a consistent and exceptional accuracy over a 6-month period, and you only need 2 sensors per year. No longer will you have to carry your CGM supplies with you. You won't have to be concerned about your adhesive not lasting, accidentally knocking off a sensor, or wasting a sensor when you have to replace your transmitter. That's right, there's no more weekly or bi-weekly hassles of sensor changes, not with the Eversense CGM. It's implantable, and it's accurate. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. The Eversense CGM is the first and only long-term CGM. Eversense sits comfortably right under the skin in your upper arm, and it lasts way longer than any other CGM sensor. Never again will you have to worry about your sensor falling off before the end of its life. So if you want an incredibly accurate CGM that can't get knocked off and won't fall off, you're looking for the Eversense CGM. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. ContourNext.com/juicebox. That's the link you'll use to find out more about the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. When you get there, there's a little bit at the top. You can click right on blood glucose monitoring. I'll do it with you. Go to meters, click on any of the meters. I'll click on the NextGen, and you're going to get more information. It's easy to use and highly accurate. Smart Light provides a simple understanding of your blood glucose levels. And of course, with second chance sampling technology, you can save money with fewer wasted test strips. As if all of that wasn't enough, the Contour NextGen also has a compatible app for an easy way to share and see your blood glucose results. ContourNext.com/juicebox. And if you scroll down at that link, you're going to see things like a buy now button. You could register your meter after you purchase it. Or what is this? Download a coupon. Oh. receive a free Contour NextGen blood glucose meter, do tell. ContourNext.com/juicebox. Head over there now. Get the same accurate and reliable meter that we use.
Yeah. And Rob is my partner. I've been telling him for, months, and he's so, I'm sure so tired of like me saying, I'm like, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Like you said, I maybe he'll feel a lot better whenever this starts to kick in. So I hope, fingers crossed.
No, I would like a thank you card from your partner.
Okay.
Yeah, seriously. I'm being honest.
I'll tell him.
Yeah. Well, I hope it helps you. I'm certain it will give you a help. This, by the way, the treatment for the geographic tongue. By the way, people don't understand how I think. If you would have just written in your email, I have geographic tongue, I would have been like, you're on the podcast. I don't even care about the rest of it. There's no real treatment, but like they tell you, like use a mouthwash with antihistamine, a medication to relieve allergic react. So you're having an allergic. Does that freak you out a little bit? Or am I the only one freaked out by this? Sorry. From the very beginning, your kids mean everything to you. That means you do anything for them, especially if they're at risk. So when it comes to type 1 diabetes, screen it like you mean it. Now, up to 90% of type 1 diagnoses have no family history. But if you have a family history, you are up to 15 times more likely to develop type 1. Screen it like you mean it, because type 1 diabetes can develop at any age. And once you get results, you can get prepared for your child's future. So screen it like you mean it. Type 1 starts long before there are symptoms, but one blood test could help you spot it early before they need insulin and could lower the risk of serious complications like diabetic ketoacidosis or DKA. Talk to your doctor about how to screen for type 1 diabetes, because the more you know, the more you can do. So don't wait. Tap now or visit screenedfortype1.com to learn more. Again, that's screenedfortype1.com, and screen it like you mean it.
It's just been so normal for me. So I guess I'm not, but the oral surgeon, when I went to see him, because I was like, do I have like cancer on my tongue? Like, what's going on? Like, why is it so painful? And he's like, well, there's no pathology, but he's like, I can give you this magic mouthwash. That's what it's called. So, and it's lidocaine, Maalox, Benadryl. I think those are the 3 ingredients, and it's like compounded. So it's really hard to get, actually.
Oh, it's for chemotherapy sores normally. Magic mouthwash is prescription mouthwash. It's made from a variety of medications.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, look at that. I literally thought you were making that up when you said it, but that's...
No, it's real.
No kidding. Oh, Brianna, what a little web you are to untangle. Okay, so are you in your 40s or 30s?
In my 30s. I'm 30.
Yeah. Partner. Are you married to?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a colloquial thing for people in their 30s.
Yeah. So we are not married. Mm-hmm. And I just think boyfriend sounds so juvenile, I guess. Like from the start, we've been together for 13 years.
Have a mortgage, stuff like that.
15 years, yeah. 15 years and a couple months. So yeah, it just was like something that I'm like, boyfriend, domestic partner.
I genuinely don't care. Like, and I'm only going to spend 3 minutes on this, but why are you not married?
I mean, we were just together for so long. And it just kind of kept going on, and neither of us, really felt.
No, I don't. By the way, it's fine. I was just looking for some insight. Like, it's just not a thing that seems imperative to you.
Yeah. I mean, we were just together for a while. Like he, was a dad already. Not like that has anything to do with, marriage.
Apparently not.
No. I mean, we were just kind of like going along, and it's like, just having fun. We got together, and it's like, okay, 5 years went by. 10 years went by, and then 13 years went by, and then we decided to have a baby, after 13 years of being together. Mm-hmm. So it just was like one of those things. We were already like playing the part, I guess.
See, I've been married for a very long time, and I feel like if I went downstairs right now and I said to my wife, hey, if I waved a magic wand and we weren't married, but everything about our life was exactly the same, and I asked you to marry me, what would you say? And she'd probably be like, I'd be like, get out of here. So, I didn't know if maybe you made it past the like, oh my God part, and you just got to the like, can someone please wash my socks? I don't have any fucking socks. Someone help me. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. It was like, I just was never the type that is like, I don't know. I didn't need like a ring and the wedding and I don't know. And we just, here we are. We're just living life and it's like time goes by.
Cool. Now listen, I'm all good with whatever you're good with. So you decide to make this baby and it pops out. Everything was okay through the pregnancy and the first 9 months?
It pops out.
Did it not pop right out? Was it a bit of a slog?
No, I'm just talking about the it part.
Oh, okay.
He.
Okay.
So I guess I should say that because Kai, could be a boy or a girl.
I wasn't sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, we had a really, healthy pregnancy. Like that was one thing, we talk about the marriage, like, I didn't necessarily need that, but I always wanted to be a mom. And, he already had a son. When we got together, he was, 5 or 6, so I was kind of there through those years. But, he actually came to me and was like, do you want to have a baby? It was his thought. So anyway, but so I was really excited. I always wanted to be a mom and pregnancy was great. Like I had a really healthy pregnancy, no major issues. I did have to see maternal fetal medicine because some way my family doctor accidentally ordered a lab that she had no idea she even ordered it and she didn't know what it was. It was called anticardiolipin and it was like a blood clotting lab.
Okay.
And it was positive. And so I had to see maternal fetal medicine because of this. And they actually started a baby aspirin because it was like the potential for miscarriage.
Oh.
So they started baby aspirin. And I also was on levothyroxine because of my Hashimoto's to help prevent miscarriage. So other than that, pregnancy was great. I was induced at the end. And the crazy thing about his arrival, we were actually in 3 hospitals the first week he was born. So we really, like after a healthy pregnancy, we really didn't have like an easy start per se.
Mm-hmm.
So he was born, had a 99th percentile head.
Sorry. I was laughing at you, not the baby. Sorry.
And actually like really scary. Like the next day they're like, his head's really big to do an ultrasound of his head, because they were actually concerned about what's that?
I wasn't sure what they were looking for.
Yeah, hydrocephaly.
Okay.
And so, of course, like I'm a new mom, everything was like good, So I was, we're freaking out because, that's really scary.
Yeah.
And, came back, everything was fine. Sent us on our way after 2 days. We actually had a pediatrician appointment the very next day because of the head size.
Mm-hmm.
They like, usually you don't have it for like 2 or 3 days after. And they weren't even worried about that when we got there. But his levels for jaundice were really high. So they sent us for blood work and then they ended up sending us straight to the hospital to go for UV therapy because his levels were so high. So
they put him under a plant light?
Yeah, he went up under in like the blue spaceship.
Well, at least you could put like an adult hat on him to keep it out of his eyes. Like a big trucker's hat or something. That would have been amazing. I'm sorry. Also, knowing that he's okay now makes this all like easier to joke about. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he had the UV therapy. Everything was good. He, recovered from that. We were sent home the next day. And like, I remember on the way home from there, I had a really bad headache and I was taking, Tylenol in the car on the way home. And we got home and, we were finally so glad to be there. And probably like within a couple hours, I'm like, gosh, my head really still hurts. And I started seeing spots.
Oh, Jesus.
And I went and thankfully my OB they were really awesome. They do like a blood pressure cuff. Like when you get pregnant, they send out this kit and it has a blood pressure cuff and all of that. And you have to like report throughout your pregnancy. Anyway, I had this cuff and I went and checked and my blood pressure was 166/110.
Hey.
So I knew what that meant, obviously. And I'm like, I went out and told Rob, I'm like, I got to go. I need to go to the emergency room. He's like, what? And I'm like, my blood pressure, it's super high.
Mm.
My head hurts. I'm seeing spots. So, here we are with our, 3-day-old baby. And I'm like, I got to go to the ER. Sorry, bye. I got to go. Called my mom. She was there in like 10 minutes and came and got me and took me to the ER. And now this is a different hospital because this is in our town.
Mm-hmm.
So this is now the 3rd hospital that I'm at. I explained to them whenever I checked in and like somebody from labor and delivery came down and got me right away and took me upstairs. And within 20 minutes, I was admitted. And within probably like 20 more minutes, I was hooked up to a magnesium sulfate drip.
Okay.
And this is like during, like, it's probably a year after COVID. So protocols are still kind of in place where like things are pretty strict and masks and all of that. And actually, so like this was not the hospital that I delivered at. And they actually, I think, had like a no visitor policy, but like, I'm breastfeeding. My 3-day-old baby is at home with Rob. He's by himself, with a breastfed baby. So like they had to make an exception and let them in. And so they were able to come in and stay.
Brittany, did you have postpartum preeclampsia?
Yes, which is really rare.
No kidding, it is.
Yeah.
Look at you picking off rare things left and right. Geographic tongue. By the way, so far I have Our Town, Seeing Spots, and Geographic Tongue as possible titles for your episode. I've got them written down on the side. I don't know why Our Town seemed nice. You're like, that's the hospital in Our Town. I was like, oh, isn't that an old play? It never happens, right? Like, it's very uncommon.
It's super rare, especially because my blood pressure was absolutely on point, perfect during my pregnancy. And I'm just really thankful that, I was educated to know what those signs were. I was super thankful that my OBs, as advanced as they are, like, being, super prepared and having like every person who gets pregnant have a blood pressure cuff at home. So like,
big deal for you, really, that being in the house.
Yeah, it really is like that. That honestly could have saved my life. They get to the hospital and, they're like kind of explaining things and like this is going to make you feel like a wet blanket is what they told me, this magnesium sulfate drip.
Good times.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like a couple days postpartum and, and the other thing was, so when we were on our way to the hospital for his jaundice, like my legs were so swollen, way more swollen than during my pregnancy. Like my skin was like about ready to pop. Like it was really bad. So like when we were at the 1-day appointment at the pediatrician, I was literally like in there talking to the doctor with my legs propped up, like above my waist, like just like a really crazy time. So then I actually couldn't hold Kai for 24 hours then because I was on this, and it like basically makes you feel like you're drunk, like probably way worse than that. I mean, I described it as like being in a limbo. Like I was like neither here nor there. Like I was just in this space. Like I could barely talk. Like my speech was slurred. It was just like a really.
Have you ever been on morphine or been really high or something? Was that the vibe? You just like not quite conscious?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been on morphine or.
Good for you.
But I would have
bragging.
to.
Go ahead.
But it was just a really odd feeling, and it was really hard because again, like I could see Rob sitting across the room holding Kai, and it's just like you want to be able to hold your baby. You're so connected, and it was just So anyway, the 24 hours went by, and that like slowly wore off. I was able to hold him again, but then I was hospitalized for another 3 days, so it was 4 days. That was actually the longest hospitalization for the whole week. So he was born on a Saturday, and we finally got back home the following Saturday after those 3 hospitals. Jeez.
Then 9 perfect months later.
Oh my gosh. So and I mean, this kid's like giving us a run for our money for this like entire time, because there's been other things, like we had to see a couple of specialists for some minor things, just keeping us really busy. So, we go home, I took maternity leave. Everything was great. I go back after about 3 months. I worked in an ophthalmology office. I worked there for 11 years. I was actually going back in a new position as staff manager. I previously was in charge of the front desk. And, so I'm new mom, going back. It was really hard to leave Kai. And, he had issues with gaining weight from the beginning. And, I just always kind of questioned my supply. And, we met with lactation consultants and things. So like I said, that was like just a really trying time. So I went back to work, and it was crazy because, I was an underproducer, and I was actually running home at lunch to take Rob milk from my morning pumps and then going back to work.
Right.
And then, it was just like this cycle. So we were like super busy and, all of that. And he would go for his checkups, and he was gaining weight, but like it was really, really slow. And he kind of like plateaued. 6 months is when he plateaued like completely. fast forward obviously to, he's 9 months old. It was actually the day before my birthday. So this is, July 27th. We were eating dinner and he made like this weird, like twitching. And I'm like, it looks like he like just had like kind of like a seizure type twitch. And, he did it again. And it's like his body kind of like went stiff. And, obviously we're really concerned. And immediately I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's, developing like a seizure disorder or something like that.
Yeah.
And immediately I'm like, I know I need to message the doctor right away. And then like right after that, Rob said to me, he's like, do you notice that he's been breathing heavier or faster? And without any hesitation, I'm like, yes. And I had just nursed him. Like I would usually do that whenever I got home from work. So before dinner. And I noticed that time, like whenever I was trying to, like, he was just like having trouble staying latched. And, it was because of his breathing. And I was like trying to put these things together. And I'm like, seizure activity, his breathing, like, again, didn't make sense to us, obviously. And then, we put him in his playpen and he did that like weird twitch again in his playpen that night. And so immediately I messaged the doctor and, it's after hours. So he gets back to me the next morning and we have a really awesome pediatrician who he calls us like right away. Like you send a message, usually within like a half hour, he's calling you to talk about it, which I love. So he's like, what's going on? Explained, he's like, I'm not really like overly concerned. Like, obviously, like pay attention to him. Like if he keeps doing it, like, because it wasn't like he was having a full blown seizure. It was just like a weird, like twitch and then he'd stop. He was saying like we could schedule an appointment, a certain amount of days out, et cetera. He's like, unless, he's having like, lethargy or, his demeanor is different or his appetite, things like that. And so that was actually, so the next day it was my birthday and I went into work late that day and I was there for about an hour whenever the doctor had called me. And I went and immediately called Rob right away. So I should mention he actually was stay-at-home dad. So I was working. We decided really early on that, we wanted one of us home. And at that point, I obviously was at my job for a really long time. It was important for one of us to be home with him. So he was stay-at-home dad. So I call him, he's at home. I said, hey, doctor said, like, we don't need to come in right away unless he's, super tired or he's just like not acting like himself or, things like that. And he goes, well, he actually just went back to sleep. And mind you, again, I'm only at work for like an hour.
Yeah.
And, usually he would have like 2 to 3 hours in between like his cycles of sleep. And he goes and he drank his bottle and he was still crying. And he's like, so I gave him more. So he had already had then like 2 bottles at that point. And I was like, all right, well, I need to call the doctor back and obviously let him know that. So I called him back and he's like, okay, you guys need to come in today then. So I went back out to work and I said to the girls, I'm like, hey, I got to go. I was only there for an hour. Like there was a birthday cake on my desk and balloons and presents. And, I was
love
just
you
like,
guys. Bye.
Bye. Yeah. It was just like such an odd day. So anyway, I left, I went home and we had to wait a couple hours for the doctor's appointment. So, we were just kind of like monitoring him and looking at him. And like, we just noticed that his breathing was, kind of different still. It was a little bit worse than it was the night before. And so that was like one of the main things we wanted the doctor to see.
Yeah.
So we get to the doctor. On the way there, he was just like inconsolably crying. He never really was a car baby. And he's
I thought you meant Rob. Sorry.
Yeah. He isn't either.
Does he know he's about to lose his gig as a stay-at-home dad?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was, he hasn't been a good car baby. He actually gets car sick, which really complicates things sometimes for us. But he just was crying the whole way there. And, it was like a 20-minute drive and it was just uncontrollable crying.
Yeah.
And, we see the doctor and we told him, his eyes seem a little crusty. His nose is like a little crusty. So we're like, he's getting sick. Like, obviously he's upset. And he did like a neurologic check. He's like, I don't really see anything that's like concerning. And he checked his ears and all of that. And Kai was crying the whole time. So the doctor actually could not see his breathing because, I mean, he was crying, screaming. And so his breathing obviously was fast. And, you know, his heart rate was going a mile a minute because he was crying. And so doctor said, he's like, you know, obviously, like, with what I see, like his ear actually looks a little inflamed. His throat looks a little inflamed. They did a COVID test and a strep swab. Everything was negative. So he's like, I think that he has, you know, just like adenovirus. He's like, go home, rest, give him, you know, lots of fluids. You can do like Pedialyte and, you know, just kind of get some rest. Also with this, he might start vomiting. So don't be surprised if he does. And we're just like, okay. So we leave. There was no like medications or anything given, of course. So we go home and, you know, things kind of progress into the evening where he does start vomiting at 9:00. And we're like, okay, like we expect this because the doctor just told us it could happen. His breathing continued to get heavier. And, you know, he was kind of like rolling around on the bed. He was like playing a little bit. And we noticed that he, like one of his toys, it was kind of heavy, but like he could, you know, pick it up before and he like couldn't pick it up. And that was like something that stuck out in my mind. And then night goes on. We really didn't get a lot of sleep because he was vomiting all night. And, you know, we were trying to get fluids in him, but he really couldn't keep a lot down. He really couldn't nurse right. Anytime he did, he would, you know, it would come back up. And by 6:00 the next morning, he was breathing so heavy that he was like, it was like somebody ran a race, but he was sleeping.
Yeah.
And I said to Rob, I'm like, we are either going to the emergency room or we're going back to the doctor. So get ready. So he went and got a shower and I'm sitting there with Kai and he's sleeping. And in my mind, like, you know, because he had just diagnosed him with a virus, I'm like, does he have RSV? I had remembered a coworker talking about her daughters getting RSV and like their chest retractions, like that it was so deep, like you could see their ribs. And so I'm sitting here looking up on YouTube, like chest retractions, and it was exactly, you know, like the video.
Yeah.
And so Rob got out of the shower and I'm like, we're going to the emergency room. I'm not even messing around with like trying to go to the pediatrician, them sending us to the emergency room later. Like we're going.
Good job.
Yeah. So we take him to the emergency room. It's about 8:00 at that point. And, you know, we get there and we're like, explain we were in the pediatrician yesterday and that, you know, things have gotten drastically worse overnight. Like his breathing is obviously our main concern at that point. You know, like this just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, you know, they start doing all of his vitals and everything, and they couldn't really find anything. And so we were kind of like going down this list of like, what could this be? And like we said, like, could he have swallowed something that like we didn't see later on? Like so they ended up doing an X-ray to check his lungs and also to check for like a bowel obstruction or something like that. Like if he did swallow something that we just like didn't know about.
Yeah.
Everything was perfectly clear. And then, you know, we were like, well, he was in this like baby pool like the week prior. And like, what if, you know, there was like, I mean, it was new pool water, but what if there was like a bacteria, you know, could he have gotten a bacterial infection? And, you know, like they were just kind of perplexed because, you know, and we were seeing like I guess it was a nurse practitioner. It was or a PA. It was in the ER. And she's just like, you know, honestly, like we really, you know, just aren't finding anything. Like we think you should go home, get some rest and, you know, kind of go from there. And she left the room and Rob and I were just talking and I'm like, I am not leaving here until they tell us why he is breathing like this. Like this doesn't make any sense. He just had an X-ray. Why are his lungs clear, but he looks like he ran a race? And, you know, he agreed. And she came back in the room and we said that. And she just kind of, you know, was silent and, you know, I think understood at that point our concern and our frustration with, you know, how things were going. At that point, it had been like 2.5 hours that we were there. And also, like, while we were there, like, he just kind of started deteriorating.
Mm-hmm.
They ended up giving him like Tylenol or ibuprofen, which was bright red. And he ended up, that came back up pretty much like right away too. They gave him that for pain in case like he was in some type of pain from a bowel obstruction before he had the X-ray.
Still no one's checked his blood sugar at this point?
No.
Okay.
Nope. And at that point, you know, she's like, well, like very nonchalant, like we can page the pediatrician on call, but it's going to take a while for him to get here. And, kind of like, it kind of seemed like pushing us away from that.
You're like,
option.
baby's dying. Yeah. Somebody.
Yeah. Like something is wrong. Like our instinct at that point was very strong. So we said, yes, absolutely. Doesn't matter how long it takes for him to get here. We'll wait. And so it took a while, 45 minutes to an hour for him to arrive. And he walked in, and within probably like 5 minutes, like, it was so crazy because I will never forget that moment, because he just was like very soft spoken. He came in, he just like didn't say much, and he just observed Kai, listened to him with a stethoscope. Kai was actually sleeping at that point, but you could see his breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And right away, like within 5 minutes, he like, I will never forget like his like lock with my eyes. Like he said DKA, and I'm like, what's that? And then he's like, diabetic ketoacidosis. And like, I'm just like, no, like that to me just didn't make any sense.
Right.
Obviously, like, and he left the room, and, we're just like reeling then, like after that, because, like that was just kind of like his like first thought, like is like on his differential list. And, here we are, like obviously clueless, not knowing what that means. And, he kind of came back in, and he had talked to the hospital that was the bigger hospital that he would potentially be transferred to. So like the talk went from like observation. He was going to get some labs drawn. This is what, this pediatrician was saying. So we're going to draw some labs. We're going to send him to this hospital for just like observation overnight. We're going to send him by ambulance. So he went and consulted with this hospital and came back, they collectively decided what labs they were going to do. And they started trying to take his blood, and they were having a really, really hard time. Obviously, he's only 9 months old, so his veins are super, super small to begin with. Obviously, as we now know, he was extremely dehydrated. They had one team that was trying to get the blood at first, and then they brought in a vein finder and another team that was, kind of like the go-to people once the first girl couldn't get it. And, they're trying to get his blood and couldn't really get it. And after that, eventually somebody came back in with the glucometer, and they're like, we're just going to take a blood sugar. And I'm standing on the left side of the bed there. And there was now, I think, the third guy in there trying to get a vein on the other side. And she starts, trying to take his blood, and like you hear it beep, and the number popped up, and it just said greater than sign 600. And I said, did that just say greater than 600? And she said, yeah. And she literally like ran out of the room. And the guy that was on the other side of the bed trying to get an IV into Kai, his hands just like start shaking. And he's like, you could tell he just like got super spooked, anxious, nervous. Yeah. Like he knew like how important it was that he needed to get
that line in. Yeah.
Get that line in. So it went from, okay, go home and get some rest, to,
where
okay,
Kai
we're
would
going
have died overnight, by the way.
Yeah,
100%.
he would have.
Yeah.
It went from go home and rest to, okay, we're going to ambulance him, to literally everybody just started running around. Like people were flying around us. And it went from ambulance to, we need to lifeline him and we need to send him right now. They were obviously needed to get an IV in him right away. They had consulted with the hospital. They said, you need to get a fluid started with him. And you also like a venous blood gas they wanted, and, like the basic DKA labs. And they finally got a line in him. And they said like, okay, Rob, we're going to have her fly in the helicopter with him. So you go, you can grab some things at home, because we were only a couple minutes away from that hospital, and then head up to the other hospital, which was about 45 minutes to an hour away from us. And so he left, which was like the hardest thing ever. I mean, you're going through this, like it's chaos, like your baby's here, like, and his like demeanor from the time that we like came in to that point was, I mean, he was like slumped over. He was pale. His lips were starting to turn blue. He had just deteriorated. And that's what it actually says in the notes. So like prior to, the recording today, I went back and, was looking at his notes, which I've done before, but, you're just reminded like whenever you read it and, like one of the things that they described is like that he deteriorated drastically in the hours that he was there and that he was like ashen in color. And it's really hard to see things like that. So he left. I'm there by myself with Kai and scared out of my mind. Obviously, you're here with your 9-month-old baby and, your life is just like crashing, in that very moment. And so finally, the helicopter's supposed to be there in a couple minutes. And then all of a sudden a nurse comes in and she's like, the helicopter won't fly. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, there's, storms in the area. They don't feel comfortable flying. We're going to do what we can to try to get another helicopter here as soon as possible. And so in my mind, I'm like panicking because I knew the severity at this point with the way that everybody was acting, like, and the fact that they're like, he needs to go now. So here I am sitting by myself in this room, like waiting for them to come update me on like what's happening. And, they finally come back in. They said, there's another helicopter that's kind of going to come. So waiting, they said it's going to be like another 30 minutes or so for them to get here. So they finally got there and, they came like busting in, like they were so loud, I guess, from being like up in the air, like talking super loud. And they were just like really kind of happy, which was, comforting, like these are the people that were going to take your baby, and we were going to fly. And they had this stretcher that had basically like, it looked like tinfoil, like this tinfoil stretcher that he was going to be placed in. And they went and they put him in and they turned around. It was 3 of them. And they're like, all right, we'll see you at the hospital. And I'm like, wait a second. No, I'm supposed to fly with him. With you guys. And they're like, no, we actually don't have room for you. Usually like we only have the 2 of us, but today we have, so-and-so's training, like there's 3. So we can't have any more weight on the helicopter.
And Rob's gone already?
He's gone already.
Okay.
And we had to wait for that second helicopter. So like so much time has gone by, like it's only 45 minutes away to the other hospital. Like he was already almost there.
Yeah.
So again, panicking that first of all, now I'm stranded at the hospital. And secondly, they're going to take my baby who is barely moving away from me. And so obviously I had to give him up and, say goodbye, which was the hardest ththing ever, watching him be zipped up in this tinfoil bag and taken out of the room. And this sweet, sweet respiratory nurse who had come in, they had started oxygen on him because like, I guess prior to realizing he was in DKA. And so she was like still in the room. She was so sweet and so supportive. She was like hugging me and, just kind of like consoling me. I went out and tried to call my dad. He didn't answer. Tried to call my sister. She didn't answer for somebody to come pick me up. And finally I called Becky, who is a huge part of our world. So that's actually Rob's son's mom. So
wow. Shout out to her for answering the phone. Yeah. Because by the way, I have this horrible idea that you're about to tell me how you have to explain all this to an Uber driver.
Yeah.
How was your evening? So well, let me tell you.
I'll reference our town again. Our town does not have a lot of Ubers, probably none. So she actually, I mean, we have a really, really good relationship, which a lot of people don't have. And I'm really thankful for that relationship. And she literally was working from home that day, which she usually works an hour away. So it was just like it aligned. She dropped what she was doing and was there within, 15 minutes to come pick me up and drive me to the hospital. Got to the hospital and I found out actually, in talking about recording today, we, kind of just like went back and kind of reminisced on, different things. And I actually found out something I didn't know is that Rob did get to hold Kai whenever he first got there by helicopter. They took him out of that tinfoil bag and, put him in his arms. And they were kind of like assessing him, I guess, after the flight. And so Rob's holding him briefly. After they realized then that Kai's IV, his vein was blown. It failed sometime during the flight. So he was now no longer getting, the IV fluids. They very quickly scooped him up and, were like, we've got to, take him and try to get access again. So, I arrived there a couple minutes after that, and they had him in this procedure room, which was honestly like I swear, like a broom closet. It was so small. And it wasn't like, like you see like an OR. I've, been in a bunch with my job and, having surgery myself. Like I expected this to be like, just, I don't know, a different looking room for a procedure room. But anyway, it was this little closet and you could barely fit, more than 4 people in there. And, I just remember this guy being sitting there on this stool. He comes in just like this very jovial man. He was like, he's like, do you want to see him? And I was like, sure. I'm looking at him laying on this table and Kai's, what I would say is asleep. And I was just kind of like holding his hand and talking to him. And, he was asleep. I felt like I was in there for a really, really long time. And like I said to Rob, I'm like, they just like, it felt like forever. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, you got to go. Like, we got to do this now. And I really think that like time stood still in that moment. Like, I think it was really probably like 2 minutes that I was in there to see him, but it felt like forever. But they like quickly pushed us out and, to the room across the hall. And ironically, that was the same exact room that we were in when he was there for jaundice. So it was like kind of comforting because we had been there before. It was this familiar place. So that part was like, okay. And we also had a family member or a friend of the family who worked there. And she actually was, in the room talking to Rob whenever I got there. We're across the hall and they're trying to get the IV and time's going by. And like, we're at like 20 minutes and 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And like, he's still not out. And you can see like our door was open and the door was closed for the most part, but people would kept like running out and running back in and running out and running back in. And you saw them grab like the supply cart and take that in. And then like you saw them take this big piece of equipment in there. And it was just like, what is going on? And again, like we had no idea what DKA was at that point, like we're just like clueless. And so, we got more anxious as time went on. Like, what is happening? Like, is he okay? Is he going to be okay? Like, is he alive? Like, And then at that point, like you started to hear that like machine, whatever it was, like beeping. And I just kind of spiraled from there because I'm like, oh my God, they're reviving him. They need to revive him. Like, I'm thinking it's like an AED and that they're like doing, like resuscitating him.
Clear, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Like
TV
that's what
stuff.
it sounded like. And actually like probably too, because like I had just taken a CPR class like a week or 2 prior to this at work. And so like that sound was like, that beeping sound was like very familiar to me. And I'm like, that was just the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, oh my God, they're reviving him. And so like at that point, I'm like hyperventilating in the bathroom in this room that we're in. And I'm like feeling like I'm going to pass out. Rob's like, you need to lay down. So I'm like laying down on the floor, feet above my head on like the toilet seat in this bathroom. Like just couldn't even breathe because I'm like, oh my God, he's dying. Finally Rob comes in. He's like, Brianna, he's like, he's back. And so like I jump up and, they bring him in and, he's still asleep and, he's breathing fast, but they finally got the IV in. Time goes by. Finally, the doctor, so the intensivist and the endocrinologist on call came and sat with us. Like again, another moment in time that I'll never forget because, they kind of like pulled up a stool, like we're going to be here for a while feeling. And they just kind of like laid it all out at that point, like, and explained to us exactly like what happened, like, and then what was happening. Like, he's in DKA. We think he has type 1 diabetes. And also the whole IV issue. So the reason he was in there so long is because they just could not get an IV into him.
Did they end up putting it in his leg, or how did they do it?
They did. So he tried 4 times, and it was on the 4th attempt that they did a femoral IV on his right leg.
By the way, shout out to Grey's Anatomy for me knowing that.
Exactly.
Not even kidding. For all you that are like, sometimes Scott really seems like he knows what he's talking about. Saw that on television.
He actually told us too that he had already called his colleague, and she was on her way because he couldn't get the IV in, and she knew how to do an IV drill into the leg bone. And that was actually what they were planning on doing. If he didn't get that 4th try,
Jesus,
they were going to do, it's like a shunt in the bone of your leg. Yeah.
Good times.
So she was on her way, and he actually, like, once he got it, called her and said, like, I don't need you anymore. They explained like the whole process, and like, obviously, like, his blood sugar's really high. At that point, I think it was like 533 was what they had gotten at the hospital. And they, explained about DKA, like, we have to do this slow, and, it's going to be over, a course of,
days.
At least 24 hours, bring it down. Obviously we can't do it too fast. There's the risk of, brain swelling and things like that. So eventually he ended up opening his eyes, and, he's 9 months, so he really can't talk a lot at that point. He's like, mama, dada, those, a couple of words here and there. But he was, crying. He wanted us. He was like, once he got stabilized, he was pretty much like inconsolable. Like, he wanted us, but we couldn't really like hold him yet.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is, like, he hadn't eaten. He had, he was vomiting, so he hadn't eaten at all. He's barely on table food at that point either. So, over the course of the day, his levels, they were going kind of back and forth. At one point, things kind of went too fast where his blood sugar was too low, gave him glucose, constantly nurses in and out with, bags. Like, it just was so crazy to me, like, seeing all of these like bags hanging, the magnesium, potassium, like the saline, they were just constantly in and out. And obviously at that point, he didn't have a CGM on. So they were doing like finger sticks and taking labs. I think he was getting labs like every 2 hours. And it's just like really hard to see. I mean, obviously he was really upset, and, he couldn't breastfeed at that point. And, that's like not only food, but comfort. And so it was just like really hard. And, his mouth, like, because he was severely dehydrated, his lips were dry, his mouth was dry. So we were like using one of those little sponges, that they have on the little stick, and, trying to wet his lips. And then he was like trying to take it in his mouth and like drink the water, which was just like, it's just like heartbreaking to see your baby like that. And things, progressed, and obviously, things went well. And the next day, like, his DKA was resolved. And it was just like really hard hearing though too, that like the doctors, like, you would hear the one doctor who met us the first time, he had said, he's like, I couldn't sleep last night. He's like, I was up constantly checking his labs that were being drawn every 2 hours. So like hearing that in hindsight, like, you just know how severe it was. And looking back on his records, like, it's, he had noted, he's like, given his age and severe DKA, he's at super high risk for complications. So from there, the next day, we're like, okay, he started like perking up. He started smiling, he was saying a couple words and things like that. And
I did okay with you and Rob splitting up, because I had to do that when Arden was diagnosed when she was 2. Like, I had to leave Kelly and Arden at the hospital to go we took Arden to the hospital in the middle of the night, and my wife was in a bikini and a sarong.
Oh my gosh.
And like, she had sand in her ass, you know what I mean? Like, it was, and so we got there, like, it feels like 3 a.m, if I'm remembering correctly. And then they put us in the crying room when they took her away, which is just this little like cubicle with a plastic sofa where you sob because you think your baby's going to die. And then we passed out, woke up. They brought her into the PICU where Arden had like 1,000 tubes and all those bags, like you're saying. I made it through all this okay. I had to leave Kelly holding Arden in that little plastic chair in her bikini with a sarong on, and drive an hour and a half back to this beach house we were at because we were on vacation. To grab supplies to come back again. Like the longest ride of my life kind of thing. And I did okay with that when you were talking about that. and I did okay with all the other stuff that I've lived through. And then you said the sponge on the stick, and my mom had cancer and she's passed now. And I remember doing that for her with the little sponge thing, because it feels so, it doesn't feel humane. It's like a plastic stick with this little hunk of sponge, and you're dipping it in water and touching their lips. And they're almost, the way my mom went after it was, she just didn't even look like a person. Like she was so like, you know what I mean? Like it was, the whole thing's horrifying. Anyway, I did okay right up until then. Then you made me cry. I'm okay now. Don't you worry. Also, by the way, you're giving me a day off. You're telling a great story and I don't need to do much. So I appreciate it. Except for the crying. This has been delightful for me. So we're on the upswing. Things are coming along. We're moving in the other direction. You're having these realizations that literally Kai almost died. I mean, while it's happening, you don't think about it. But they don't put a lot of 9-month-olds on a helicopter for good reasons. You know what I mean? So you guys probably left that hospital, and I bet you most of the people were like, geez, I hope that baby makes it. Like,
I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure. And whenever the doctors came in to sit with us in that serious conversation, they mentioned, the intensivist said, I'm so glad that, your parental instinct kicked in, because if you would have went home, he wouldn't have made it the night.
Yeah, 100%.
Actually, he said a few more hours.
No, I was going to say, yeah. I mean, listen, I brought a 2-year-old into an ER that was in a pretty similar situation to yours. And that we got the whole like, hey, she almost went into a coma. Like, oh, great. And speaking of that, so later in our hospital stay, that same intensivist, I said to him, so how close was he to a diabetic coma? And he just looked at me like, are you crazy? He's like, he was in a diabetic coma. Yeah, we're there.
So when I said, earlier, he was sleeping, he wasn't necessarily sleeping. Yeah. He was comatose at that point.
Off. Yeah. Jeez. Wow, it's crazy.
So,
now we know the name of your episode. Have you ever heard DKA on a speedboat?
Yeah, and a plane.
DKA on a plane. I think this one's DKA In Our Town.
In Our Town.
Yeah,
okay.
I think so. Because
we're only a portion of the way through, so it might change again.
I'm assuming. Oh, really? The story could literally pick up from there.
I mean, yeah. So, and that's the thing is our DKA story, some people, I feel like some of the episodes I listen to, it's the short thing, but for us, it was this very traumatizing thing, and so much happened from the point of hitting the hospital to discharge. So we actually were there for 11 days. So let's continue on with the next day.
Pick this story up in episode 1263. Did you know if just one person in your family has type 1 diabetes, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too? So screen it like you mean it. One blood test can spot type 1 diabetes early. Tap now, talk to a doctor, or visit screenedfortype1.com for more info. Arden started using a contour meter because of its accuracy, but she continues to use it because it's durable and trustworthy. If you have diabetes, you want the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. There's already so many decisions. Let me take this one off your plate. contournext.com/juicebox. I want to thank the Eversense CGM for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast and invite you to go to eversensecgm.com/juicebox to learn more about this terrific device. You can head over now and just absorb everything that the website has to offer, and that way you'll know if Eversense feels right for you. eversensecgm.com/juicebox. All right, guys, I'm out of here. Do me a favor. If you need or want anything that is sold by one of the sponsors, please use my links. When you do that, you are supporting the production of this podcast, helping to keep it free and plentiful, and you're just helping me out. I pay my electric bill with this money. I keep the podcast going. I'm not saying buy something you don't want, but I mean, if you're getting an Omnipod, then go to my link. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Tickets for the 2025 Juice Cruise are limited. I'm not just saying that. They actually are limited. We have a certain window to sell them in, and then that's it. Juiceboxpodcast.com. Scroll down to the Juice Cruise banner, click on it. Find a cabin that works for you and register right now. You are absolutely limited by time on this one. I'm so sorry to say that. It sounds pushy, but it's the absolute truth. Juice Cruise 2025. I hope to see you there. We're going to get a tan, talk about diabetes, and meet a ton of great people who are living with diabetes. It's kind of going to be like floating diabetes camp, but you won't have to sleep in a log cabin. You'll get a tan, and it's not just for adults or kids. It's for everybody. Okay, well, here we are at the end of the episode. You're still with me? Thank you. I really do appreciate that. What else could you do for me? Why don't you tell a friend about the show or leave a 5-star review? Maybe you could make sure you're following or subscribed in your podcast app. Go to YouTube and follow me, or Instagram, TikTok. Oh gosh, here's one. Make sure you're following the podcast in the private Facebook group as well as the public Facebook page. You don't want to miss, please. Do you not know about the private group? You have to join the private group. As of this recording, it has 51,000 members in it. They're active, talking about diabetes. Whatever you need to know, there's a conversation happening in there right now. And I'm there all the time. Tag me. I'll say hi. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.